So, we're on to our first keynote address for the day. We have the privilege of having the Hon Amanda Rishworth MP, Minister for Social Services, with us online. Minister Rishworth is joining us via video teleconference, and we are very thankful that she's spending time with us. Minister Rishworth was elected to the Federal Parliament for Kingston in Adelaide's southern suburbs at the age of 29. Before entering politics, Minister Rishworth qualified and practiced as a psychologist, working with general practitioners in the delivery of mental health care to the community. She has a really diverse portfolio which encompasses women's safety, social security, delivering on the early years strategy, providing support for pensioners, improving the lives of Australians living with a disability, and tackling the harm caused by online wagering. Minister Rishworth, I know you're passionate about improving the lives of all people living in Australia. Please join me in welcoming the Hon Amanda Rishworth.
Thank you for inviting me to join you today. And I would like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands in which I'm joining you today, and also where you are, and pay my respect to elders past and present, and extend that acknowledgement to all First Nations people there with you today. Very pleased to see that this conference does have a strong focus on reforms on closing the gap. It's the same focus that drives our government to committing the implementation of the Uluru Statement from the heart in full, including a referendum on the voice to Parliament later this year. The voice will be empowered to make representations to Parliament and executive government about matters affecting First Nations people to better enable decisions and outcomes. It's about recognition and it's about listening. And I want to assure you that the voice won't replace our commitment to working, of course, in partnership with local communities and people. It will only strengthen and complement it. Because, of course, listening and learning is how we make a practical difference on the ground. Now, I am very much encouraged by the theme of choice, collaboration and connection. And I think your agenda is exactly right. And I think also, while the conversations and the workshops will be essential to ensuring that your work is strengthened and improved, but of course, that you're able to support us in delivering our agenda. Because of course, our government, if we are to achieve what we want to set out to achieve, will need a vibrant service delivery non-government sector. We want to continue to build partnerships, look at continuing improvement, and always look at how we can do things better. And I think particularly it's important that we look at how we can work effectively with others. We're only a year in, or not even a year into our first term, and we've already delivered many important areas, including the National Plan to End Violence Against Women and Children in One Generation. Of course, we've started consultation and work on the early years strategy that is aimed to have a consistent, connected strategy for children from really conception to 5 years of age, where we know we can make such an enormous difference and change the trajectory of that child's life. We've launched our safe and supported action plans to protect vulnerable children, particularly with a dedicated Aboriginal action plan, which was co-designed by Aboriginal leaders with expertise in this space. And of course, we've also looked at in the most recent budget, expanding, for example, eligibility to single parents or principal carers whose youngest child is under 14 years of age. And of course, we're looking at how we provide better support with reforming the Parents Next program, abolishing what is currently known as Parents Next, and looking at how we provide a less punitive model that actually delivers the right support for parents. Now, we've achieved these outcomes and really in partnership with non-government organisations and local community organisations. We've achieved it by working constructively across portfolios to start to break down some of those silos in government between social services, health, justice and education. And of course, working collaboratively with state and territory colleagues who share responsibility and who actually have many of the levers to work together is critically important. And in the budget, we've announced our next step that we want to take to really look at how we meaningfully and significantly overhaul the way Australia tackles entrenched disadvantage. We want to look at the community level, working in partnership with communities to empower them to take place-based, community-led decision-making to deliver the outcomes their community deserves. This means trusting communities, delegating decision-making at a local level, through cross-sector collaboration to strategically target the solutions that the community want and they need, but also providing them with the information, them with the data, so that they can make meaningful decisions in their local community. Of course, I know that Family Relationship Services Australia has long advocated for better coordinated services. And of course, the funding in this budget will allow us to do better coordination, but also unlock philanthropic support and ensure that we're all pushing and collaborating and delivering in the same direction. Now, of course, at the beginning of my term as the Minister for Social Services, I made very clear that this wasn't me just talking, it was about me listening. And I think for too long, under the previous government, many voices were missing in the debate and not being able to make a contribution. And of course, we really need to mix the listening, the voices of lived experience with the evidence and the research to ensure that we are delivering the best possible services and indeed the outcomes to community. Because if we don't listen to the lived experience, if we don't start understanding the unique experience and the specific challenges on the ground, then we won't actually make a difference. And so I think listening to what actually works is so important. Just last week, I did announce funding for Teach Us Consent. It's just one example of where our government has listened. And this is really important. Teach Us Consent is a young organisation run by young people talking about the messages of peer-led content that will work when we talk about consent in relationships. And I have to say, when governments don't do that well, it does end up in milkshake ads. So this is really important that we get the delivery right. And so I think this is really important work. But of course, it's really important that it also aligns with our national strategy to end violence against women and children. And so really, it goes back to listening, but not just listening, handing over some of that work to be led by those who know the work most. And that is always can be a challenge for governments just as organisations to delegate control, to delegate a decision making and to allow others to lead that work. But if we're truly going to make a difference, we need to have the bravery to do that. Now, of course, that co-design is also so important. And we've heard, for example, for many years, many advocates, including many in the disability space, been telling us that simple phrase, nothing for us without us. And so definitely how we continue to improve relies on evidence, it relies on research, but importantly, implementation relies on co-design. And we have been looking at many ways through our different strategies that we can incorporate co-design. And just recently, and a number of you in the room may have participated, we announced and convened our first meeting of the Redress Survivor Roundtable. People that work in the redress scheme, people with the lived experience of accessing the redress scheme to give us feedback on how we can improve that scheme. And we will continue to look at how we engage with survivors, advocates, and service providers to ensure that we are improving the experience. And in the budget, we've also announced extra money to improve that experience. Now, of course, outcomes matter as well. And I think one of the challenges we all face together is not just funding services, funding projects for the sake of it. We need to know that what we are funding actually does make a difference. And so this is, of course, critically important. We need to be able to justify that the taxpayer's dollar is delivering the outcomes that we want it to. We have to have the bravery, if it's not working, to try something different. But of course, it doesn't mean that every policy needs to be able to work across the country. We should be looking at how we invest in small or local communities in a different way. Listening and understanding communities' needs means not being afraid of taking a local approach to policy solutions and indeed looking at tailored solutions across diverse communities. And one of the examples that we've recently announced is the place-based escaping domestic violence payment trial in Cairns. Of course, the escaping domestic violence payment is rolled out in a relatively uniform way across the country. But when we looked at how we could make a difference, particularly Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, it was really clear that we had to do better in working in partnership with local First Nations organisations and Aboriginal controlled organisations to deliver that service. So we are trialling delegating control and decision making in this place-based in Cairns to do it differently. In the disability space, we've also launched 10 pilot programs to do things differently under the cross-government activity in the safety targeted action plans. A number of these will be very much local solutions, but in some cases, the learnings and the applications will be able to be applied nationwide. So this will be important that whether our pilots just work locally or indeed can be rolled out nationally, there's learning for us all. But we do need to look at the evidence. We do need to listen to the lived experience. Of course, many of the programs the Commonwealth delivers cannot be done without a strong community service sector, because in many ways you are the frontline services for the Commonwealth to deliver on the outcomes and objectives we want to see. And I would like to thank all of you in the room for the work that you do in delivering, whether they be government or non-government funded programs to families and children right across Australia. And I know that particularly if we look in the context of the last 3 to 4 years, so many of you have had to work in unprecedented conditions during COVID to try and look at how you continue to provide that service and support in really dynamic ways. And so it is important that we are committed as we come out of COVID to supporting and looking at how we build a strong community controlled sector, and particularly supporting organisations that deliver such needed support on the ground. And of course, in the May budget, we did update the indexation framework to ensure that funding for the community sector organisations do receive better funding to align with some of the economic conditions. It builds on our October budget that also put funding into community sector organisations to ensure that wages could increase and that organisations could deal with the inflationary pressures. So ensuring we continue to encourage and embolden and support a strong community sector is essential for our government, because without you, we won't be able to deliver the support that we need to families right around the country. So I think just finally, I'd like to say thank you. I think I've seen the program of this conference. It is looking like an incredibly exciting conference. A lot of conversations that will challenge, that will improve what you do. And really, my message to you is that I want to really, along with the whole government, continuing to work with you and other community organisations to make a real difference in communities and make the lives of Australians better, because ultimately that's all what we want to do. So thank you for having me here today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Have you got time to hang around for a few questions?
I
That'd
do.
be really helpful, thank you. I just want to say myself thank you for your emphasis on listening. Thank you for your emphasis on hearing people's lived experience as well as understanding the outcomes. And thank you for your recognition of the value of the work of this sector. That really came through strongly. Really appreciate that. It's just time now for people to ask questions, and this microphone will be wandering around the floor. So do we have questions? Can you put your hand up, please?
Hello, Minister. Thanks very much for that beautiful address. It's not lost on everyone. I'm not part of the group here, but I did welcome the country, and I'm a Kumba Merry man from the Gold Coast. So my question is, the Close the Gap agenda is always been high on my radar and many people in our communities. It's still an indictment on the government policies over the years that we haven't even closed any of the gaps completely. We're working hard. I know the governments have been working hard and the community's been working hard, but do you see a light at the end of the tunnel?
Yeah, look, thank you for that question. And I think for me, who's been in the Parliament for a long time, very interested in seeing those gaps closed. It's just frustrating. And I know it can be frustrating for many people. I do see the way that some of the focuses of the Closing the Gap at the moment being strengthening Aboriginal controlled organisations to really support them to deliver services in their communities, I think is critically important. But equally, I think this is where our debate around the voice comes in. So many people have been, I think, opponents of the voice, quite frankly, have been saying that this is not about changing things on the ground, when what we know it is critically important that we do hear the voices of First Nations people and that they can have a voice directly to the executive government as well as the Parliament, and that is where we will shift. So look, we need to do things differently if we are going to close the gap. We do need to relinquish control and support Aboriginal controlled organisations in delivering what often they know are the solutions. But equally, it is about ensuring recognition and direct input to government policy from a national voice. And so I think these are some of the steps in addition to some of those specific gaps that we need to close. But we do need to do things differently, I think, and we need the bravery to do that. So, but I think the will is there from government.
Anyone else got a question?
Thanks, Minister. I'm Sue Hillier from Family Support Newcastle. My question is around how the state and federal governments are communicating. We've had experiences over the years where there's double ups So I'm just wondering, is that on the agenda to open that communication with the states?
Yeah, look, you're absolutely right. And, you know, particularly when we get into some place-based solutions, there's a number of locations around Australia where both state government, federal government have duplicated services, but then there's glaring gaps in other places. So I would say a couple of things. On our National Plan to End Violence Against Women and Children, that is a plan that is signed up by both the states and the Commonwealth, and the action plans we're working on will be signed off by both the state and the Commonwealth. So the idea is that those are plans that we work together. And in the national plan this time, there was a much clearer delineation of who's responsible and who's not. So I would say that particularly in the national plan to end violence against women, I would say equally for the safe and supported framework, while the Commonwealth doesn't have direct child protection responsibilities, we have looked at how we coordinate through that framework and through that action plan. So there is work being done. Those are particularly in my portfolio areas where there has been really good work done, but there's plenty of areas where we can do better. I think the area of disability, which the NDIS sits with Minister Shorten, but I'm responsible for the Australia's disability strategy. I think while there is some coordination there needs to probably be better coordination, and we're working towards that. So in my portfolio, we are looking at how we do work better together. But I think when we look at some of the place-based solutions, that really is where we can drive that coordination through having state government, local community, local council, and the federal government all sitting round having the conversation together about what priorities there are for the community. And I think that's when we really start to see really good coordination within communities. It's hard work. If everyone wants to get a program out the door and try and fix things, it is hard work to coordinate. It should be easier, but certainly I'm very aware that much more needs to be done, not only to ensure there isn't duplication, but to also ensure that then resources can be directed towards where gaps are.
Thank you for that emphasis on collaborating and listening. So strong in what you're obviously passionate about. Thank you. Any more questions?
Thank you, Minister. Roseanne Plunkett from Catholic Care Wollongong. Minister, I'd just like you to give a few insights on what your thoughts are and what the government will do to invest and support families struggling with poverty.
Yeah, look, thank you for that question. So I think there's poverty and entrenched disadvantage has been something we've been very focused on. Obviously, part of the answer is around some of the income support changes we've made and announced in the budget, particularly the significant, the largest increase in Commonwealth rent assistance for the last 30 years, the extension of the parenting payment, which we think was really important. The cutoff at 8 was really affecting people significantly, and so increasing that eligibility to age 14, increasing job seeker, that's part of the answer. But also it is very much about investing in communities. And so our early years strategy, which we're putting together at the moment, is really how can we best support children from birth to 5 years of age, particularly focused of how we lift every child up and with them their families. And so looking at those number of areas is really important. And I know I harp on about the place-based initiative, but I'll give you one example where our place-based initiative has been working, and that is in Logan, in which we've seen where community has come together and identified their priority. It really was on prenatal care and postnatal care. And through just a 2-year investment in different solutions, we've seen the rate of stillbirths drop from 2% in the First Nations community there to 0.5%. And so that is a real tangible outcome that will lead to better outcomes for that child and, of course, parents as well. So that's just a small example, but it's all of these things that we have to chip away at across the board. One of the catch-up measures we are looking at in this budget is actually an investment in foundation skills. We know many people are locked out of economic participation because they've missed some of those basic foundation skills that are now required, basic literacy, basic numeracy. So how do we not just talk about increasing training places, which is really important, but how do we go back and actually look at the gaps there? So that I've just given a couple of examples there, along with income support, is really looking at that. And then there's a piece on looking at how do we better support people with financial resilience. And so that's another piece of work we're certainly looking at as well.
Thank you, Minister Rishworth. So I'm thankful for your willingness to answer questions from the floor and to connect with us and generously share your time with us today. So again, can we all join in thanking Mr. Rishworth?